Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining this webinar as we explore agro-processing opportunities in the Pacific Islands. And today we're going to be talking specifically about cocoa and value-adding opportunities that exist for cocoa producers and enterprises in the Pacific. And we have two wonderful enterprises who are joining us today. We're going to ask them to turn on their cameras and let's see how the connection goes. So please, Floris and Richard, please turn on your cameras. And we'll begin by just going around so that everybody on the screen can introduce themselves. And we're going to do something a little bit different this morning. We don't want a long introduction, but we want you to tell us your name and what chocolate you brought to the webinar this morning. So we'll start all the way from Brussels. So Iselina, if you could please introduce yourself and tell us what piece of chocolate you brought to the webinar this morning.
So thank you very much, Kyle. Good evening from me. Good morning, of course. Good afternoon, good evening for us. It's good evening. It's 11 p.m. I work for COLEAD and is a partner of the Pacific Farmers Organization in this series. So I'm in Belgium. We cannot live without chocolate. So I have this one half, and then I have one for cooking. It's very important for cakes and so on. So I say hello to you, and I taste the white one.
Oh, nice. Thank you, Iselina. She's got the white one she brought. Great. And what about you, Floris? You want to introduce yourself and tell us what you brought to the webinar for show and tell?
Well, I think I'm, hello, I'm Floris from Samoa, and Samoa is in the heart of the Pacific. And unfortunately, fortunately, I have a number of my products, my chocolates here, but I've made some bean to bar with raspberry. So it's 70% cacao with some raspberry on the back side of it. So that's what I'm going to eat today to get my energy up for this meeting. So nice to meet everyone.
Oh, great. Yes. Oh, thank you. And Richard, please, you introduce yourself and tell us what you brought for show and tell.
Isi Andrevinaka, that's good morning from Fiji, from Vanuatu in Fiji. Of course, I've brought Cocomana chocolate. I don't know, the thing's not really showing. Very simple, environmentally friendly cellophane packaging. This is a byproduct of the sugarcane industry in Queensland. This is probably our most popular bar, with a hint of sea salt from Fiji. But what I'm going to sample today is one of my favorites, which is the coconut cream bar. Don't know if you can see inside there. So that's condensed coconut milk with desiccated coconut in a 70% chocolate covering. That's not too bad.
Sounds tasty. Oh, great. Thank you. And we have also our behind the scenes team from COLEAD. So Excel and Arthur, you want to show us what chocolate you're going to bring to the event this morning?
Yes, so it's the end of the day for us in Brussels, so my chocolate is almost empty, but I always eat the dark chocolates, and especially the one with salt. I agree with Richard, it is the best.
Nice, dark chocolate with salt, thank you. What about you, Arthur?
Yes, hello, good morning, good evening. I have the little things. Okay. Hello. So I forgot to take the packaging. So I just have the raw chocolate like this. I think it's like a milk chocolate classic. Yes.
The classic. Great. Thank you. Well, I ran out of my two favorite chocolates, which are Cocomana and Miss Sunshine Farm. Of course, I ran out of them because they're the first that I ate. So I do have a Fiji chocolate that I'm going to eat this morning, and it is mixed with chili. So Fijiana cacao and it's mixed with chili. So that's what I'm bringing to the webinar this morning. Oh, and of course, I think coffee and chocolate are the best combo because it's morning time. All right, so now we are all hopefully in the mood. So we'd like to begin our webinar by, whoa, that's a kick, by inviting everyone to engage. So hopefully not to just listen, but also to engage with questions. Both Floris and Richard are very generous with their time and their information. And of course, the technical partners of this webinar. So we have a chat function and a Q&A function. So please, thank you for those who are using the chat function there. We can see people joining in from different parts of the world, Nigeria, from Fiji, from Rwanda. That's awesome. So thanks for introducing yourselves in there. And then the Q&A is down there on the bottom. So if a question pops up, please feel free to use the question and answer, and we can come back to those throughout the webinar. We're going to be together for 90 minutes today, and I hope it's going to be fun. So let's start with going to COLEAD. So Isolina, why do you think this webinar series is important? So as a development partner, technical organization, why is this kind of webinar important, and why is cocoa so important?
Thank you very much, Kyle. So on behalf of COLEAD, I'm very happy to be here today. And for us, as a non-for-profit association of private sector operators across, as you said, continents, we value very much the agro-processing part. We work in all the parts of the value chain, from sustainable production, of course, to end consumer. But for always, I mean, the value added is critical for us, as well as inclusivity with the small holders. I mean, fair prices, green and sustainable practices, and so on. So we are very keen on that. We like very much when we work in regions and with partners like you, Pacific Farmers Organization, to showcase, local successes, because very often still, when you talk about cocoa in some parts of the world, we still tend to think that we are the consumers in this part where I sit, for example, Europe or the US, etc., and the others are producers. And this is over, fortunately, for quite a long time. And the sector is booming in those countries with a lot of creativity, really quality, sustainability as well. And more, I was chatting a bit with our speakers, and more as well with local markets, not only export markets, which is normally what you think it is. So this is the part that personally interest us the most. And we have a series of tools I will not detail now, but Axel will put the link to our website. So we are an association, but we also manage development programs for different donors. These series are financed by the EU and the OECPS, Organization of Africa, Caribbean, and Pacific States, but we manage programs for multilateral, bilateral organizations, and so on. And it's really providing capacity development, trainings, technical assistance, tailor-made, so it depends on the demand, is always, responding to demand. Excuse me, business to business relations, fairs, really everything that gets the entrepreneurs, the local entrepreneurs, very often small, medium size, to improve their production, as well to their access to markets, be local, be regional, or be export, or sometimes both, because they tend to be in different markets as well. So we have quite a wide range of services. But the thing that interests the most, and I will finish there because I think the speakers are more interesting than I am, is really to listen to the voices of the ones that really do that chocolate. And why chocolate? And you tell me about cocoa, because cocoa is one, with a few others, of those commodities for people who are my age that, were really exported as a raw material. So seeing now all the processing with really quality that goes with it, I think it's awesome. And I'm very, very proud of the local enterprises that do that. Thank you very much for associating us to this conversation.
That's great. And lots of opportunities there, as you said, to meet the market potential and tapping into the innovation, not only on that end, but also on the early part of the value chain. And as I mentioned, my name is Kyle from Pacific Farmer Organizations. And I think the two words that stick out to me the most about this particular webinar and the two enterprises here, the first is the word innovation. So as you're listening today, I want you to try to pick up, because there is a lot of innovation here, but also the word diversification. And both of these enterprises, I think, have survived and are continuing to survive because of innovation and diversification. And I hope that message comes out strong to all of our listeners here today. And again, I'm very thankful to each of the presenters who had to go to different locations. You can see Richard sitting in the car in order to get a good internet connection. And I know Flores was working very hard to get her connection this morning. But without any further ado, we would like to jump straight into the presentations. Again, if you're just joining us, thank you for using the chat. Awesome to see participants from Cameroon, from New Zealand, from St. Lucia. If you just joined us, we were all telling everyone the kind of chocolate that we ate. So feel free to add in the chat if you have a favorite chocolate or a favorite country that you like to source your chocolate from. Go ahead and add it into the chat there so we can see. But also use the question and answer as things pop into your mind, and we'll try to use the chat to respond, but also we can respond live. So it's my great honor to introduce my friend and colleague, Richard Markham. So I first met Richard back in 2008 when he was the program manager for ACIR. ACIR is an Australian government agency, and they really support collaborative research. And in that particular project, we were a cooperative working with the research agency and the government to do this kind of collaborative research. And so Richard was a great mentor for many of us. And he retired to the beautiful town of Savu-Savu, which also has a special place in my heart because that's where my wife is from. And Richard and his partner set up Coco Mana, which is what we're going to hear about today. And I think it really is a wonderful convergence of a illustrious career and pulling together so much of the expertise that Richard had in research and development, and hopefully developing a lifestyle enterprise over there. And so without any delay, I want to hand the floor over to Richard to tell us about Coco Mana. And again, participants, be looking for these words, innovation and diversification. And accompanying Richard's presentation will be some slides run by COLEAD. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Kyle, for that overly generous introduction. One thing I feel about having had a long career in sustainable agriculture is that I hope along the way you've made most of the mistakes that you can have a chance to make. So if I, oops, you see that, there we go. Well, perhaps my function now as an, what should we say, an older citizen is to help the ones coming up to not make the same mistakes as I have made. So anyway, here you go. Coco Mana, I want to talk to you about the role that food processing plays in a very, very short market chain. This is one of those market chains where you can actually walk from one end of it to the other. So we're a tree-to-bar chocolate maker, but I think we're also looking for sort of positive social and environmental outcomes here in Vanuatu island of Fiji. So I don't know if you can see that picture reasonably well, but we could actually tell the whole story around this picture, because that's the Coco Mana chocolate factory, as you see, made in pretty much entirely from local materials from Fiji pine and stuff in the middle of a cocoa agroforest. And you can see the cocoa, those leaves down on the left, just above the Cocomana logo and behind the factory to the left. But the farm is only 1 hectare, two acres. We've got about 400 cocoa trees, and we've got about 90 other different kinds of fruits, nuts, other cash crops, and medicinal plants, and so on. And if your screen is set up the same as mine, you won't be able to see the other obvious crop, which is coffee. Those leaves poking out from behind, in my case, Kyle's picture, are coffee. And just an example of the other things, if you go that tree straight above the cocoa bit of Cocomana, that's what we call mokasoy or ilang ilang, the garland tree. And so that's important fragrance, but it's Fijians put the scented flowers into coconut oil, and I particularly like it because it's a magnet for the local fruit doves, the endemic fruit pigeons that we have here, rather beautifully colored. So that's an example of one of the many trees that we like to encourage along with our crops. So next one, please. Really quick history. So you guys are interested in processing. So I was going to say, cocoa gives us one of the earliest examples of food processing in archaeology. French scientists, molecular biologists have found traces of cocoa in this La Florida archaeological site in Ecuador, which is from 5,500 years ago. So they were already grinding up and processing cocoa in the Ecuadorian lowlands 5,500 years ago. Fast forward to the 16th century, still 500 years ago, the Aztecs considered cocoa to be sacred. It was their gift from their senior god, Quetzalcoatl. Try and say that off. Anyway, yeah. And it wasn't grown in the Mexican highlands where the Aztecs were based. It was sort of collected as colonial tribute from the Mayas and the Olmecs and other sort of more peaceful people further south. But it was used as currency for 100 years after the Spanish conquest. It wasn't even consumed really as a food, just as a sort of ceremonial thing by the elites, the priests, the warriors going into battle. And as I said, currency for 100 years later. And when the Spanish were the first people to actually do plantations of cacao, first in Hispaniola and then later in the Philippines, again, it wasn't to eat it or drink it. It was simply their Bitcoin. They were minting money. Money did in those days grow on trees. So they were growing cocoa to finance the rest of their conquest of South America. Next one, please. Sort of the transition to the modern times. It's almost exactly 500 years since the last Aztec emperor, Montezuma, gave cacao to the visiting, not necessarily invited, Cortes from Spain. He took it back to Europe, and for about 300 years, it was just a curiosity passed around amongst the rich and the noble in Europe as a physic, as they would call it. But it sort of hit the mass market in the 19th century. These Quaker industrialists, if anybody knows British confectionery, they'll know the names John Cadbury, Joseph Fry, Joseph Rowntree, because they still survive as different kinds of candy to this day, even though they probably all belong to Master Foods now or Nestle. But those people, they started producing cocoa or chocolate, not as chocolate bars, but as a beverage, as a temperance beverage, as an alternative to working people drinking too much gin, which I gather was quite an understandable thing in the miserable north of England in the 19th century. And so it came a commercial crop around the world at that period. So it was introduced to Fiji, Samoa, Solomon Islands, New Hebrides, which is now Vanuatu, the Bismarck Archipelago of Papua New Guinea, between 1870 and 1880, so 150 years ago. What was the cocoa that was introduced? Sorry, next slide, please. I'm going to talk for the next hour and a half about cocoa genetics, so don't worry about this. No, so look, these are the basic types of cocoa as determined by DNA fingerprinting. You can see there's lots of diversity there in the upper Amazon, but we just need to focus on the Criollo type from Mexico, which is what Montezuma gave to Cortes, and amelinado, or what we now call forasteros, from the lower Amazon in Brazil. Now, as we said, criollos were not very productive. They were rare enough to be made to use as currency. But what happened around that time, mid 19th century, was that the two things, the Mexican criollo, the Brazilian amelinado, were taken to Trinidad, crossed to make these so-called Trinitario hybrids, which are still, next slide please, recognized to this day as fine flavor cocoa. Now, what's interesting, or there's several interesting things here, but we need to move on rather rapidly, but see the message in the top left of your screen, the sort of forastero type cocoa from Brazil has now taken over about 90% of world trade, most of that now grown in West Africa and Southeast Asia. And that's what goes into your industrial commercial cocoa bar. Bean to bar processors like Floris and ourselves here in Fiji, we're messing around in the remaining 5 to 10% of non-forastero cocoa. A lot of it are these so-called Trinitario hybrids that were brought 150 years ago to the South Pacific. If you'll forgive me a little bit more molecular biology and genetics, those graphs in the middle, that's from DNA fingerprinting trees on our farm. And the blue comes from, basically the blue comes from Brazil, from the forastero. The orange comes from Mexico, criollo. And you can see that 7 out of the 9 trees sampled, even though they're the subject of much later selections, there are things like Laffy 7 from Samoa, the middle picture, at the bottom, or those lovely red pods at the left. Those are from Fiji's own breeding program back in the 1970s from Wainingata Research Station. But it's interesting that somehow this balance between criollo and forastero has survived in these modern varieties. You know, that's a happy thing because that's what gives us fine flavor chocolate. Just as a quick aside, which Floris will perhaps tell us more about, cocoa was adopted in a big way by Samoa as the national drink and so on. Comes as a, you know, the cocoa Samoa is national beverage, and if you buy it online in Australia, it comes with a marketing story which says that the Incas of Peru gave cacao directly to the Samoans in pre-Columbian times. So, as a spoilsport molecular biologist, I can tell you that doesn't seem to be true, but it was actually brought there in, I think, 1873 by the German Hamburg Handling Company. But hey, never let a good marketing story go to waste. And Cocoa Samoa is, I think, responsible for keeping up the enthusiasm for this style of cocoa. Mild tasting, fruity notes, and lots of high butter fat. So it's perfect for making bean to bar chocolate. And we can thank the Samoans for keeping that tradition alive. Sorry, next one, please. So this is why cocoa doesn't work for smallholders on the whole. So that's going back to 1980. The price went up to $4,500 a ton for about, what's that, 40 years, is that? The price has dinked around between $1,500 and $2,500 American dollars a ton. So it's a mug's game if you think about how much the price of fertilizer, fuel, labor, and stuff has gone up in the last 40 years. This year, amazingly, I haven't updated this graph, I'm sorry, there's another spike this year. But I think you'll find that most of the benefit of that will go to the traders in the Chicago and Rotterdam, and not to the original farmers. So next one, please. And I think this illustrates why. Do you see the front corner of that bar closest to the camera? That's the tiny proportion that goes to the actual cocoa farmers. And what's interesting about this is from an NGO in the Netherlands. It's getting worse. Do you see that little note at the bottom? Back in 1980, the farmers were getting 16% of the eventual cocoa price of the chocolate bar. Now down to, well, this was 2015, it was down to 6.6%. It'll be worse now, I would think. And the short market chain is that the advantage is that all those other bits, the people who take, the retailers, manufacturers, processors, and grinders, well, people like Floris and me, we're all of those things. We take the thing just from the farm gate and we sell it straight to discerning consumers, such as those of you online. So next one, please. So how does a smallholder make a living from cocoa? I'd suggest they focus on this high quality, fine flavor market, that 5 to 10% of world trade, short market chain, cut out all those greedy people in the middle who take all your all the profit from out of the market chain, and tell an appealing story. And so next one. But I think, how do you make it sustainable? I think you've got to grow the cocoa in an environmentally responsible way. So there are lots of nasty stories around saying how awful a crop cocoa is. And I don't think it's generally true. I think it depends how and where you do it. But anyway, we can argue about that some other time. And I think you need to give a fair deal for your suppliers, for your customers, for your employees. So that's part of our DNA, I suppose, is sort of fair trade all the way along the market chain. And I think these marketing stories are only truly sustainable if they're actually based on fact and evidence. I think people will find out if you're telling a fib. We're not in a market which relies on third-party certification. So if I say that there's no pesticides in our chocolate, I don't have a label from Rainforest or whoever to back that up. People have to trust me, and that trust will be undermined if they trip over a can of glyphosate as they go down the drive. So we try to actually live the principles that we put forward. Next, please. So this is our team, just very quickly. Kyle mentioned that Anne, my partner, was the original chocolate maker, and I'm there over the left. I set up the farm. So the people who actually run the operation now are these lovely people in the middle. That's Joeli Nataki and Atalina Renandi. So Joeli runs the farm and does most of the tour guiding, and Lena was our chocolate maker for a while, but she now mostly looks after the books, the office, the personnel and stuff. And then the person, alas, sorry, this is again a feature of PowerPoint that I'd forgotten. Those hands belong to our lovely chocolate maker, Anna Finau, and those are some of our assistants up above in the processing shed, breaking up pods and putting them for fermentation. So on we go, please. Next one. So this is just a snapshot of our business model. Yes, we do sustainable cocoa production. We turn it into fine flavor chocolate, and we also are open for agri-tourism. And this is not just by accident. I think the actual selling straight to discerning high-paying customers like tourists is actually driving the quality all the way back, not just on our farm, but all the way back to the farmers that we buy from. I should mention that we produce about half the cocoa we need on our own farm, and the other half, very intentionally, we buy from smallholders all around, and we try to pay them a fair trade price, at least twice what's the free on board price would be, and we pay that at the farm gate. And basically, this direct link to a discerning market, it drives quality right the way through to the choice of varieties, fermentation, sun drying without getting any smoke taints and so on. And also it drives it economically, because we don't have all those middle persons running trucks and ships and aircraft around the world. All that stuff can actually go into the actual producers and processors. Thanks. Next one. So just a snapshot of our farm. We like to claim that our agroforestry system is regenerative. You can take damaged, degraded land and rebuild its soil fertility. We took over an abandoned cassava farm back in 2012. the squatters who'd made the farm, they'd cut down all the rain trees, which I consider a crime against ecology, because those are the driving the fertility of the farm. The place was just overrun with invasive weeds, as you can see top left there. We set up very quickly this sort of agroforestry system based around velvet bean, mucuna, and what Fijians call vaivai, Gliricidia sepium. And very quickly tried to capture the site, got fast growing things like papayas and bananas and plantains growing, and put in the things that would eventually be the shade trees. And the picture on the middle there is 2019. So what's that? That's only 6 years after planting. You can see already the shade trees, the hardwoods we've planted are starting to come through and shade the cocoa. Yeah, and I don't know if you can see those notes on the right. We've planted the trees rather for resilience. We've got rather more shade than would be right for maximum productivity, you know, our emphasis is on soil fertility, lots of recycling of nutrients, mulch and compost and so on. So a little bit of fertilizer to keep the potassium up particularly. Next one, please. Right, there we go. Well, there's not really time to go into this. Just for curiosity, agricultural tourism, that's Wainingata Research Station and some of the varieties they bred back in the 1970s. We tried to do a bit of our own sort of citizen science, looking at appropriate rates of fertilizer and compost and so on, trying to do non-chemical pest and disease control, and trying to learn from it so that we can share this with other growers. Thanks. Next one. There we go. So look, this is the magical transformation that everybody gets so excited about. Really important quality all the way along the line. The trees have to be growing well so the beans get nice and full, high dry matter content, plenty of cocoa butter content, and you know, it's really important that they're harvested exactly right. Too many underripe ones, you get flat beans and quality problems. Fermentation is often not done properly by smallholders. You have to have enough at a time. We won't try and ferment anything less than about 500 pods in a batch. We put them into these old-fashioned wooden boxes. We let the fruit flies bring in lots of yeast to set the fermentation going. They do two days, they stir them, 2 more days, they stir them, 2 more days. About the 6th day, we're opening them, and those beans on the bottom right are kind of ready for drying. So next one, please. There we go. Now this is a little bit not conventional. The pundits tell you, the old timers tell you, that you leave the pulp on the beans so that it protects the beans, the seed coats. But we've found, in discussion and learning from a local producer here in Fiji, that actually it's really helpful to get as much as you can of the pulp off. You get a cleaner taste. It sun dries much more quickly. You get rid of any off tastes from the fermentation, and you get a nice clean, sunny taste. Right, next one, please. I could spend a whole morning talking to you about how to reduce mold contamination. And anyway, and so there we go. This is the stuff comes in from the sun drying racks. Should sit at least 1 month, and if possible 3 to 6 months in the store to mature and stabilize. We roast. Some raw chocolate makers don't roast. We reckon it's a good contribution to the flavor, but we roast at a relatively low temperature, sort of like well, at least 100, 102, 103 Celsius for food safety, but not more than 120. So, because we don't want to drive off the sort of fruity notes that are characteristic of the taste of Trinitario cocoa. You crack it, very basic machines, winnow it to get rid of the seed coat. Some people like to make tea out of the seed coat. I reckon that's biologically, I think that's a bit suspect. That's where any mold and microbes will be. So I put that in the compost heap. Nice clean nibs there that you can see, and those go into the conching grinding machines. We only do them, that's about 8-10 kilos at a time. Next one, please. So you put the dry ingredients in those grinders. That's granite wheels running on granite wheels. And then Floris, you were talking about getting the thing cool enough. That room is double insulated with styrofoam, double glazed and stuff. So when we're actually making chocolate, we chill it down to about 18 Celsius. That picture on the bottom left, that's what the chocolate looks like if you take it straight out of the grinding machine and you don't temper it. If you want a candy bar, chocolate bar that's got a nice snap and crackle to it, gloss, then you've got to get it into the sort of organic crystal of cocoa butter in form, what we call form 5. That's the cocoa butter that melts between about 32, 33 Celsius. And we do that by agitating it gently on that cool table, warming it back up to about 32, 33, and then it should set into that nice. Those ones in the middle are just being checked the next morning. Each one is individually checked to make sure that it's perfect. If it's not, we eat it. No, we don't. We put it back into the thing and melt it. And yeah, and that's the packaging that you've already seen in reasonably environmentally friendly, low carbon footprint cellophane from the byproduct of the sugarcane industry in Queensland. Sorry, next one, please. So you're interested about new products and things. We're trying to sort of add value to local Fijian ingredients. And so we don't really use anything that has to be imported. Iconic local ingredients, our favorite things are those coconut bars in the middle, and the one to the right in the center, the small picture, that's chocolate coated ginger. We grow small amounts of ginger ourselves, but it grows better on the dry side of the island. So we buy ours from Kaiming Processing over in Navur. All the stuff scraped out of the machines and so on goes into the chocolate fudge in the middle. But that's the coconut bar that I was eating at the beginning of the session, and that's Sam, our previous chocolate maker, dipping ginger. So, the next thing we'd like to do, I mentioned our sort of standard chocolate bars are flavored with sea salt or chili or chai masala. That's a contribution of social fusion from our Indo-Fijian community. And increasingly, if we can solve the technical issues, we'll use nuts like tavola, that's sea almond, Terminalia catappa, or vutu nicana, that's Barringtonia edulis, in place of things like slivered almonds in the nuts. Next one, please. So not much to say about this. This is just our sort of farm tour. There's both looks at sustainable farming, the processing, that's the sort of getting people to understand that you taste the beans straight off the tree. They have no chocolate taste whatsoever. Got to be really well fermented and then sun-dried to get a nice clean chocolatey flavor. And then obviously people get to taste the chocolate to see what the different features are. Thanks. Next one. And as you can see, the idea of our tours is they should be very participatory. Okay, so this is the last one. This is where we segue, I suppose, into, well, no, perhaps go back to the, yeah, that's fine. I would say that the chocolate enterprise is running reasonably smoothly now. It's not profitable enough. We only ever have about 2 weeks of money in the bank, so we need to grow a bit. But basically, I think the model works. We've been making chocolate since the 1st of July, 2019. And basically, I think we've shown look, it's not profitable. It's never going to be, it's never going to be make a significant amount of money. What it does, it provides a reasonably good livelihood for 6 Fijians who work with us, and hopefully for the cocoa suppliers we buy from. So what we're doing now is perhaps going a bit on the front foot to try to take our agroforestry model out to the communities that supply to us and to the individual farmers. But in Fiji, something like, I don't think it's 85% of the land or something is under communal ownership. And a lot of this land, the management exemplifies what we used to call the tragedy of the commons, or a shared resource which nobody actually feels they have to look after. So picture on the left, yeah, it's quite scenic, isn't it? But you have to think that a generation ago, that was all covered in forest, and those grassy slopes, that's mostly, you can see on the picture in the middle, that's mostly now invasive African grasses, perennial grasses that were brought in colonial times as fodder for cattle. On those hills, they're not used even for grazing or pasture. Those hills are essentially unproductive. So the effort here is to rebuild with agroforestry. Those chaps on the top, they're making use of the remaining bits of gallery forest to get some quick returns. They're planting coffee actually, but there's cocoa just behind them. There on the slopes, we're doing the sort of land capture with Gliricidia and mucuna. And I've just put a couple of examples here of things that you can grow in these systems. But what we'd say to any community is grow what you think you're interested in. And this pilot project that we have with Vusiratu up on Natewa Bay, on the Natewa Peninsula, we've basically said to the community, whatever you buy, you will grow, we will buy it from you or help you find a buyer. Anything. Noni, that's the one in the middle, that grows on the most terrible poor soils. There's still plenty of noni actually growing on that abandoned looking hillside. There's a processor here in Vanuatu, Doreen Robinson, who's exporting, I don't know, thousands of liters of the stuff a year to Japan. I think it's disgusting stuff, but apparently it's very good for your health and it's profitable. So that's an example of how you can, there's no single, you absolutely don't want a magic bullet, because anything that's highly profitable this year will probably collapse next year. Vanilla's part of the thing, but the price is notoriously volatile. You should have some anchor crops like cocoa, coffee to give you a steady income, but then lots of other high value. Another good example, Dilo, beech mahogany, grows really easily here in these coastal conditions. Really quite a valuable oil, increasingly for both in sort of traditionally, but also in modern cosmetics. Turmeric, the one on the right there, grows really well in these agroforestry situations under high rainfall, increasingly profitable as a nutraceutical export to the US market. So basically, you're limited only by your imagination. And also, I think the key thing is being able to understand quality characteristics and organize a value chain into those markets. And I guess that's the little bit that I can perhaps contribute to this bit, where the Fijian farmers are really good at growing these crops, but perhaps marketing to international markets is another area where people like, there are lots of projects now trying to link smallholders up with international markets. But it's easy to say. In practice, it's quite tough to do. And cocoa exemplifies it, but it goes through all these other varied crops that you can grow with your cocoa. And if we could close the final slide, I just want to acknowledge we've been helped by lots of people along the way, government projects, but above all by other farmers, other people who are already trying different things. And Kyle said, innovation, people suggest things to you, talk to them, try this, try that. And that's really how you make progress, is sharing experiences. And as I said rather dismally at the beginning, you learn from your mistakes as well. And that's where perhaps I can be helpful. Don't do what I did. Very good. Anyway, I want to thank all these people who helped us along the way. Thank you.
Kyle?
Yeah, thank you, Richard. No, that was fantastic. I want to hand it over to Selena. I know she can facilitate. Maybe she has a couple of questions, or if you want to field some from the question and answer.
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you, Richard. Very, very nice presentation. Very interesting, and a lot of encouragements for many people. Of course, you showed something which, being a scientist yourself, that would have helped you. I don't know, it's a kind of question. And also not only the quality part, but the safety part, the food safety part, I think is very important. Not only because COLEAD works on food safety, but in general, I mean, you need some kind of, knowledge or assistance there and so on. So this will be, it's good to encourage, but, and I think Pacific Farmers Organization and ourselves always say that you have to have fundamentals, you have to have skills, develop skills, have assistance, etc. You can try, but to go to the market, even when it's local, I mean, we encourage, of course, safety and quality, and in that sense, you have a very, very nice product. So the questions, one thing would be, you markets, where do you sell? If it's just locally, or you said a bit on agritourism or a bit on some tourism shops. Do you sell online as well, or not yet? And do you foresee that? And then there are a few questions on, of course, agroforestry limits very, very much, the dependency on one crop or one product, which, as you say, many depend on international prices, which, those countries are not price setting. But the trade-off between the economic benefit, because you still are a business person, you still have to make some level of earnings, and also the environmental and social costs. So there are a few questions around that, because the access to financial resources, especially for small producers or small businesses, is very difficult. So how do you see that? And the rest is very much appreciation, contacts, people who have a bit the same issues as you had and want, to learn, to grow them. And on agritourism, is it something that you are, developing more in the coming years? I work myself a lot on agritourism in the Pacific. I'm very happy to see that it's something developing, because it was not that obvious at the beginning. And of course, it's also something you combine with other eventually resources, because tourism tend to be as well cyclical. So is there something that is it also staying facility, is more a tour to the plantation and see chocolate and taste, or are you going to develop that part? Because I think many people in our audience will be interested by that as well, from other islands and other countries.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Isolina. Just quickly on the food safety. I mean, I think it's really interesting how much resources there are now online. It's been central to our thing. It's been something where my partner Anne has taken the lead. She's trained herself online as a Australian standards food safety inspector level, I think it is, and she's sort of imbued that into our staff. And that's why we don't actually allow any of the tourists into the kitchen. They look through the double glazed windows. So I think that's really important. And incidentally, that's been at the heart of we've had a sort of 5-year wrangle with the local health department, who I think don't actually understand food safety standards. I genuinely believe we have the cleanest factory in Vanuatu, but we don't seem to be able to, they don't seem to be able to collect a series of samples and process them and give us a certificate each year. So, that's central to our business. We try and set our own standards, but then, it's really important to, I think, recommend people look at those online resources available from Australia and New Zealand. The diversification and the trade-off between a successful crop and all these other interesting things. Look, I was interested in my career in plant genetic diversity. So I think when we met before, I was helping to look after the world's banana genetic resources. So obviously I love biodiversity, but excessive biodiversity is not profitable. So that's why I say you have an anchor crop in your agroforestry system. It can be vanilla, it can be coffee, it can be cocoa. You get to know that one really well so that you can be the best at the best in the world, or at least the best in your market in that particular commodity. And you set up that system so that at least we get a decent yield. I don't get as much yield in cocoa as, let's say, farmers on the Atherton tablelands in Queensland who cut down all the trees and they pump water and fertilizer into their cocoa and their coffee through the fertigation system. I won't go there. I don't believe in that for ecological reasons and sustainability reasons. So what do? I accept a yield that's maybe 1/3 of what they would get in Queensland, but that's okay. I'm not paying 18 Australian dollars an hour for the cheapest kind of backpacker labor. So you make compromises on these things, and it's really important to be sort of cognizant, think about these trade-offs. It's not just highest yield and stuff. If we put too much fertilizer, well, if we put any nitrogen onto our trees, we just get too many leaves. We don't get a better yield. So you've really got to sort of think about it as an applied ecologist. Honestly, it's honestly not profitable. This is set up basically as a social enterprise. But this is partly our own caution. I think, if I was more of a businessman and less of a land manager, I suppose I would probably get a concessionary loan from the bank or a grant and double the size of the production, and diversify into more products. And that goes to the market, which I'll talk about in a minute. At the moment, everything you see there, we built out of my dwindling public sector retirement savings. So we have the advantage that we don't owe the bank anything. They can't close us down. But it really would be advantageous to have a bit of a bit more capital investment, to a few more machines, larger machines. We're in a very vulnerable situation where we basically have one of each machine, and when something goes wrong and breaks down, we are in difficulties. At the moment, our primary grinder has broken down, so we're actually making our cocoa nibs by hand, crushing them. So that sort of thing happens. You want to avoid that. In fact, at this time of year, we've got lots of tourists, especially yachties. We really have difficulty keeping up demand. We're running at about 250 bars a week, plus these various other products. That's all handmade, and we sell those straight off the shelf each Friday evening. They're empty, and we have to agree who's coming in over the weekend to run the machines. So the quiet time of year, we like to do deliveries to Suva, which is a bit more of a perennial market. There's a bit more people with money in their pockets all year round. We're trying to sell through resorts and sort of top end restaurants and things like that. People who will, I think, use this chocolate for a high end market. We can't compete with cheap stuff imported from Southeast Asia. We're just not in that market. It's a different product, and this and yes, the tourism is really important. I mentioned it as driving quality, but it's also the economic driver. It's honestly the profitable part of our enterprise, and we're helped in that we belong to what's called the Duavata Sustainable Tourism Collective, and we are we're very grateful to them. It's mostly other Fijian-owned small businesses, and we exchange experiences. We cross advertise. We're going in with another similar enterprise called Bula Coffee, which does hand harvested or wild harvested coffee. So we're working with them on the agroforestry outreach. And I didn't mention, it was right at the end of the last slide, but we're looking to attract carbon offset funding as possibly another source of income for communities, and hopefully that might drive the reforestation effort. So if we can bring in preferably even sort of green tourism conscious carbon offsets, like from the airlines, from the cruise industry, from hotel chains, so that frankly, the tourism industry here is shamefully unsustainable. It is disgraceful, unsustainable socially and environmentally. Obviously, it's sustainable economically. They're making pots of money and exporting it. And the final thing I'd say is that I guess what we're trying to do is to hand the ecotourism market also over to communities. That community which we see in Bustaratu, our first pilot project, we see them doing ridge to reef eco tours. They have coral restoration projects. They take people snorkeling. They take people bird watching. They take people collecting butterflies. We've set up a butterfly house there. So the idea now is to, I think, agri-tourism or agri-ecotourism is something that can work for community-based tourism, as opposed to this sort of non-sustainable extractive model of tourism that we have at the moment. Sorry, is that a bit of too much of a rant?
No, thank you so much from my side, Kyle, to you. I mean, it's just excellent, great, excellent, etc. I mean, look at the chat. Yes, I think people learn a lot. Thank you so much, Richard. Kyle.
Oh, thank you, Richard. And I love to hear the discussion about being a part of a collective and learning and sharing experiences. And it's a great transition to our next presenter, not far away from Fiji in beautiful Samoa. So I want to introduce Flores New of Miss Sunshine Organic Farm. Thank you for turning on your camera there, Flores. We're keeping our fingers crossed that the internet will hold up. Joining us from Tuinai Village in Samoa. She is family owned and operated. The farm is called Miss Sunshine Organic Farms, and they've been working to revitalize their plots, their family plots, since 2013, and making a very special chocolate, which is prized in the New Zealand market, and also, like Richard, committed to much more than just her own business, but committed to communities. And I think one of my greatest memories of Flores was as she was the key organizer of the Pacific Cacao and Chocolate Show in Auckland in 2022. And just to see the way she was able to pull all of these different producers and chocolate makers from the Pacific and give them the platform. And it was exciting talking before. Flores was telling me that a lot of them have now graduated beyond this kind of Pacific chocolate show and now are participating in these international. And so there are a lot of great success stories there. So we are excited to hear your story, Flores. So I'll hand the floor over to you.
Thank you, Kyle. Thank you, Isolina, and Talo Falava from Samoa. And I think you were going to put a video on for me first, or yeah. Thank you.
I had come to the end of the road, really, to a really dark place where I thought that there was going to be no return, and I came to Samoa to end things, but instead I ended up beginning my life here. I guess as a symbol of that, I was in the plantation and I looked around me and I saw all the trees. In some fantastic way, I saw that they were, cheering me and there for me and supporting me. I felt all the trees around me and I wanted to feel alive again. That's when I saw the cocoa pods, and I guess it could have been any tree or any fruit, but it kind of came to me as a symbol. So the cocoa pods, the cocoa tree, that's what it was going to be. So this land is really, it's flowing through my blood. The soil of this land, the sweat of this land, and all the hard work that has gone before from my ancestors is here. And I guess I wanted to make something of that, and that's how I found cocoa. I began a love affair with the cocoa beans and the cocoa trees, and I really found it to be something that I could really pour my soul and my pain to it. It's been difficult. I won't say it was easy. The journey has been most difficult when you are trying to impart your ideas and your beliefs and really try to inspire people in what you're doing by living it versus having a piece of paper that says you're certified organic, but you're not really living it. I've come here. This is the land of my ancestors, and I have a claim to it. I belong here. I think slowly after 5 to 6 years, people have started to accept me and they start to know me again, that I am of this land, because I've proven to them I can grow things and I can take care of myself. And the only way for people to know, your customers, your people that come to visit you, tourists or whoever, to really know and believe in what you're doing and buy into what you're doing is by living the life with you. And that's where the WOOFers come in. WOOFer stands for Worldwide Opportunities on Organic Farms. And I invited people from all over the world to come and stay. I live in a tiny house. It's very basic. The kitchen is bigger than anything else. We do have this shelter here in the plantation, in the middle of the plantation, where we host all of the tours that we've begun in 2016. Every tour is different, and it just keeps adding. We keep adding to it, and it just becomes so much more of a journey itself for people who are here, who are attending the tour, and also for the helpers. Planet Conscious is about us imparting what we have as a gift to other people and sharing that knowledge and sharing your inspiration and your ideas with people. And for me, I do that with food, and I do it with my writing, and I do it with growing cocoa and processing the cocoa, and then making chocolate and making chocolate is a very small part of this. This is an adventure. Part of me finding myself, finding my purpose, and how I can inspire other people to find theirs is by coming back to basic life here in the island and simplicity, and to give and to love others through what you're doing.
Thank you for that. Thank you everyone for your patience. That the sound of the birds and everything in the background there is actually all the natural sounds of what my plantation is like. And I'm Flores, and my Samoan name is Fa'alualwo, and Fa'alualwo means ambitious. And so basically, our plantation, I'm a 4th generation cocoa grower or cacao grower in my village. And I think back in 1915 was the first time that cacao was actually planted on our ancestral land. And the land that you saw was part of our 3 plantations, which is on our ancestral land in Tuanai village. So I have come a long way from that video that was shot in 2020, actually during COVID. And we had begun, I had started to replant some of the land. We have about 70 to 75 acres of family land or traditional land, which is full of traditional crops like taro, yams, tamu, and manioka, cassava in Fiji, and a number of other crops. Our village is actually famous for cocoa because one of the very first cocoa associations or society of cocoa growers was actually based in our village. And my great-grandfather, he was a farmer, a fisherman, and he was also a leader of our community or our village. a high chief, a paramount chief. And so I come from that strong ancestry of, understanding, knowing where you belong, and understanding, what you're going to carry into the future and how you're going to inspire the next generation of people. And I think a lot of my farming, I don't have the scientific background or the actual farming qualifications like probably a lot of people do when they go into farming. As you can see from the video, I fell into cocoa farming through tragedy and things that have happened to myself over the years as a young woman. And now I have 5, 6 products from the crops that that existed already on the land. I think when I started, there was only about, I don't know, 1,000, 2,000 trees that were remaining from previous plantations. I revived completely. The land was very much abused by chemicals over years and years of our family not being there. And I came back and I brought it back to life with the help of the community. And I think it's about 5 acres of land. And it took 5, 8 years for it to really come back to be able to bear good fruit. And that cocoa is probably the highest yield of cocoa crops that we have. There's about maybe 1,000 trees on there. But altogether, with my brother and I living on our land, we have coconuts, we have pineapples, we have bananas, and all the other traditional crops, but we have a lot of cocoa. And since we began in 2013, we now probably have around 5,000 trees. And unfortunately, our biggest enemy is theft of our crop. And, sadly, that's what happens in the village. But what we can actually yield, and I think one of our biggest yields one year was about maybe 3 to 5 tons. And then it's just gradually gone down over the years as we've, it's really difficult to be able to manage such a huge area of plantations with just 2 people and like casual staff during the harvest periods. So from that, I'm actually very, very proud, and it's good to look back on old videos to see how far you've actually come. And I've managed to do so many things since 2013, and I never thought that I would be here to even, be able to produce any products with the cocoa, because even though my ancestors had contributed to the export of cocoa from Samoa during the 50s and 60s, there was no, we weren't processing cocoa ourselves. We were basically just, cultivating, harvesting, and then fermenting, as you saw in the presentation before. And then the Samoan people were just weighing the cocoa bags and sending it off to Europe and America to make products. So I think if my ancestors are looking at me right now, they would be very proud that I was able to carry it on and actually produce our own products from our own crops here on the land. And I think that's the only reason why I continue, because as Richard has said, it's not necessarily profitable if you're doing it on your own and at a small scale and as a tree to bar, processor or enterprise. However, like Richard also mentioned, agritourism or eco-agritourism, as I call it, is probably the avenue or the other value adding. Although it's not a packaged product, agritourism also fell upon us because that is the one platform or the one retail space that people don't necessarily think about where they can sell a lot of their products. And I think because of the type of eco-agritourism that we practice, and we have a very strict rule, a set of regulations on our farm because we're being organic. And you might have heard me mentioning planet conscious. And like Richard, I'm trying to revive our forest because there's hardly any forest left in the village. Everything gets cut down, and sometimes government encourages monocropping in some areas, and I think it's unfortunate. When that happens, we lose a lot of our medicines, we lose a lot of our traditional crops, we lose a lot of ideal and yummy products, plants that we can actually package and put into amazing medicinal products, and also, I call them yummies. And over the past 5 to 10 years, I've tried to rack my brain on how I can package all the things that I love on this place, on this farm. Because every time I see, even though we are a cocoa farm, we actually have a lot more coconuts, coconuts, the copra. We have a lot more of that on our land because my great-grandfather planted, some 70 to 100 years ago, these coconut trees that have provided for 3 generations. And I think one of the things that we take for granted here in the Pacific is that we don't necessarily look at replanting. When we take from the land, we don't necessarily replant. So that's one of a huge educational thing that needs to happen. And that is a goal that I have, that whenever I package my products and I'm talking to people during tours and all of those things and introducing what we make on the land, I make sure that I actually talk about how it's important to reforest or afforestation, and to replenish the land, because that is the way of our ancestors, and that is our traditional ways of doing and being, and ensuring that we have the food security that we need, and ensuring that we look after our communities first before wanting to supply thousands of tons to the rest of the world. And I might be a little bit of a hippie when I say that, but I've taken my business, which hasn't been a business that long, very, very slowly. The enterprise began as a trust, Miss Sunshine Organic Farms Charitable Trust, and it's slowly working its way into becoming a business. In 2020, as I said, we shot that video, and it was sort of the catalyst for me to actually start putting my products out there in the marketplace, out there in New Zealand and Australia, because people were coming to the tours since 2016 and were asking me, can we buy this somewhere else? Where else can we get this? Can you send this to America? Can you do this? And so I've slowly kind of, because also the employment industry is very fickle. Labor is really difficult in the Pacific because other countries are actually poaching our labor and taking them on for the seasonal works in agriculture and livestock, all those sorts of things in other countries, but they're not understanding that this needs to be sustainable. And as I say that we need to replenish the land, we also need to replenish our people. So we need to train our, locals, for the ones that are coming up, the young ones, to be able to, agro-process, to replant the land, and obviously give them the skills that they're, be able to start a business. Because as you can probably hear from me, is that I didn't have a business plan when I started this. As I said, my business began as a charitable trust to help other women, really, really focus on supporting women. And I've done a number of projects that included women from around the Pacific to help support them in cocoa, and cocoa processing, and making chocolate, of course, whoever was interested. But what I've ended up doing over the past 5 years, so in 2021, we actually opened our business in New Zealand. The challenge that I had in making products for the marketplace here in Samoa is the temperature, the climate. It's really hot. I don't have the equipment. I don't have the refrigeration. I don't have you know, the air conditioning and, you know, building structure and all of those things, and the infrastructure to be able to build an adequate small business, thriving small business here in the islands. And also there isn't that huge a market here in Samoa for the things, because what I make are very unique products. They, you know, they're things that people in Samoa have never heard of, you know, sometimes. So I have a little plate in front of me, which I don't know if you can see, but I've got all the little products that I've been making over the past few years. And one of them here I've got here is some cocoa liquor, which I've been making with my cacao. And I make guava and coconut jam and cocoa jam or chocolate jam, which is also from everything from the land. And the thing is, when all your crop is falling on the ground, you know, it's such a waste. It's so wasteful. And, you know, I started having helpers or volunteers from overseas through a woofing program. And I'm not sure if everybody knows what woofing is, but woofing is worldwide opportunities on organic farms. Some people call it willing workers on organic farms. Whatever it may be, it's an opportunity for tourism in a different kind of way, where people come and stay for a longer period of time. So maybe a few weeks, a few months, and sometimes a couple of years. And they stay with you, and they have free accommodation and food. But what these tourists are actually doing is they're not only helping you on your farm to help create products, to help you get your products out into the marketplace and to promote it, for example, that video, but they're also helping, you know, add to the economy and tourism here by staying here for such a long time, and supporting the community as well. So that's one of the reasons why I did woofing, or I asked people to come and help me. So as far as agro-processing, I've mentioned, and I think Richard has mentioned many different challenges, which is the same as what I have here on our land. But even so, I managed to make 6 different products that I do have out in the marketplace. And, you know, one of the things that I make and is exported to New Zealand, it's actually made in New Zealand, but I actually also make it here in Samoa, and I now export it through retail in the airport, and also through tourism, when the tourists who come from all over the world, they come to our farm and they have the experience. I'll tell you about the experience on the farm soon. But here's another product, which is cocoa candy, which is more climate, you know, it's not going to melt. So it's just made out of the cocoa nibs, sugar, cardamom, and a number of yummy ingredients. You can add sesame seeds or nuts that are in season, or whatever is actually on the land. So I started also making products for bakeries and other people who are making, you know, chocolate products here. So for example, melting chocolate, it's actually melted as I've been sitting here. So I'm really sorry if you can't see, but it's melted chocolate. And two types of bean to bar. And we grow Rosella. And Rosella is, as you know, is a hibiscus type of flower. And basically you can dry it and you can make jams out of it. You can make, so one of the other things is that because it's expensive to buy ingredients from overseas like raspberry to put on your chocolate bar, so you can do this and replicate this with hibiscus or any other edible flowers that you have in your garden. And it's another opportunity to also share that with other women who are growing these flowers and bring them in together to dry them communally. So we're looking for drying houses so that we can set up for, you know, more women to be able to dry all the fruits and spices like cinnamon, nuts, and everything, including cocoa, which then goes into all these products. So our main product, as you can see, is cocoa, chocolate coated cocoa beans, which I think you've had, Kyle. So it's basically the cocoa bean, and it's slightly roasted, so it's still really, really good and very high in its nutritional benefits. It hasn't been burned like what they do with the coco Samoa. So, and it's coated in chocolate and then rolled in cocoa powder. And we do 3 flavors, which is raspberry, which we now can change, and we now use our own cinnamon to coat the beans as well for the cinnamon flavor. So we do raspberry, cinnamon, raspberry soon to become coated in powder made out of the rosella. So it'll be the rosella. And so there's many other things like that. Like I said, our village is famous for pineapples. We're the biggest, probably, pineapple growing area in Samoa, and one of the biggest cocoa growing area here in Upolu Island. So it's just about taking advantage of what you have on your land, and really kind of getting creative with that, diversifying, I guess, and innovation and innovating with everything that you have access to. For me, it's a waste to try and make a product that is full of overseas ingredients, and then you're not able to tell that ingredient story or that food story from your own backyard. And I think that's really, really amazing in marketing. I think one thing that we've probably done really well is marketing ourselves, our story, and our product. We've done that really well by being invited to shows. For example, the Tauranga Food Show in New Zealand. We created our own show, which is the Pacific Cacao and Chocolate Show in 2022. And, just participating in events like, just being part of these webinars and, setting up events either locally or in other countries like Australia and New Zealand, and just being part of the chocolate community, the craft chocolate community, and collaborating with other growers. With other chocolate makers and producers. So one of our biggest collaborator, which is the only producer or chocolate maker that we sell our beans to in New Zealand, is agro-processing. And he's Maori British, and he's very passionate about his ancestry. So it was very interesting for me to meet him because we had the same background. We had similar challenges throughout our career, or changing careers into becoming farmers and chocolate makers. And now this year we have together won 6 awards, 3 of them gold medals, and with the 94% bean to bar. It's called agro-processing, and it's been in Salon du Chocolat in Paris last year. So it was showcased there, and then it went into the competition for the Outstanding Food Producers Award in New Zealand this year, and it picked up 3 medals, and the other products which he uses our beans in. And the reason why I'm saying this is not to brag on about how we've won these awards. It's important to win awards, but it's important to also collaborate with like-minded people who have the same philosophy and have the same value of land and our traditions and our customs, and the value of eating from your cultural landscape, which is something that we have forgotten to do or are not doing anymore. How many people go in their backyard and actually harvest and then come and put into their salad or their food? We are going to the supermarket and we're importing foods. So it doesn't make any sense in the Pacific to do that. So I think programs and support to help us to reach into our own backyards and into our own land and be able to showcase amazing products and amazing food and nutrition that is available here. I think if you and other people can help us do that by collaborating and making those products shine and making those crops shine, I think then we're successful. I think that's the key. And agro-processing in Samoa is difficult because of the packaging is really, really expensive. I'm having to buy everything from New Zealand and have everything made there, because if you have a design and in Samoa they don't necessarily have the right paper or the right stickers or the right, adhesive or anything. So everything you have to import. So we have had to import boxes and boxes of our packaging pre-made. And the challenge in having a lot of packaging pre-made is that when you have limited edition products like this, like these cacao beans, because limited edition in the sense that when it's not the season for Rosella, we have to change the product. We have to change it to something else. So in having to reprint all of that, it becomes very, very expensive. And it's really, really a big challenge for me, the packaging. And we've also had challenges in having biodegradable packaging because, again, as I speak about planet conscious, and we have planet conscious on our packaging, which means that it's fully compostable, it's planet friendly, it's thinking about people and animals and everything. So, all of those ideas, and you might think that something, you don't want to compromise anything for what everyone else is doing. And I think part of the success of what we've been doing is that we were not willing to compromise, on packaging. We were not willing to compromise on our story. We wanted to tell our own story. We didn't want some third party marketing person coming in and trying to write a story about us. We know who we are and what we can say. And, but all of these things, all of these products, we run a tasting. So part of our tour is the traditional umu, or the earth oven. So we throw in the tradition into the tour. And then after the tour, we do the walk through the plantation where they get to taste the actual fruit. And as Richard said, a lot of people have tasted so much chocolate. And I'm sure they're in La France and Belgium and Brussels and everywhere. Everyone has tasted chocolate, but not necessarily seen and tasted the fruit. And so the wine, the cocoa wine that I make for the tour, it's only for tasting at the tour because we're not at the stage where we can market it and send it out there. But people get to have a little sip when they come. And we've had so much amazing feedback about all the different products that we make available for the tasting at the tour. So everything from jams to chutneys to we make little fruit wraps out of the cacao pulp that we don't throw away from making the wine. So everything, we use absolutely every part of the bean. The cacao husk or the skin of the bean gets made into tea with the rosella together, and cinnamon, which grows wild in our agroforest. So everything, we're just trying to reach out to all of the things that help us, to inspire us, and also to be healthy. And one of the reasons why I started to do this was because I was a cancer survivor, and it was really the biggest inspiration for me to come back to nature, to come back to the land, and to eat from my cultural landscape, to avoid all the pesticides and everything that is in our food today. Paraquat being a huge issue that we still advocate against, and for banning paraquat in our country. And I think, if you have something that you are passionate about, don't let somebody sidetrack you into achieving that, because you can work slowly as a one-woman band, or if you have a great bunch of friends and women around you who can help support that. I've slowly, after 10 years now, I've been 10 years back in the farm. I grew up in New Zealand and came back home, and I've managed to put a tribe together of women who support us, and that those women keep bringing other women from other countries to come to the tours. And I just saw a message come through from another helper who has got a group of, her family coming from America to come and do a tour. But one of the key things in our tours, as a final thing I want to say, because I know you have questions, is the educational part of this, organic, regenerative efforts that we're trying to make to help support our islands from climate change, and all of those things. And you might think that agro-processing and making chocolate and making all of this is, very far away from that. But I think if you keep your philosophy strong and you stick to it, from the beginning to, to now, I think people will come along on that journey with you. People respect you. People want to support you. And so one of the key groups is one from Australia and New Zealand of bringing young people. And this group is called Future Leaders, and you might have heard of them in the other islands because they go to other islands too. There are a number of year 13, 12 and 13 students, young leaders, and people are wanting to learn about different cultures and learning how leadership works in those different cultures. And those are the types of groups that we have been attracting to our land to come and learn from us, to learn from our experience, from our challenges, and learn how we were able to lead the way in what it is that we're doing, which is quite a niche, making chocolate here in Samoa, because Coco Samoa is pure 100% the cocoa block, which is made into a drink and into food. This is more value adding in terms of adding flavors and adding other ingredients and just being a little bit more creative with what we have with the other crops, mixing it. Coco Samoa is purely just cocoa or cacao. It has nothing else added to it. But all the other ingredients in our garden, we want to be able to use in our products. So that we can eliminate the imported and other products from elsewhere. Not that we don't like the other products like sea salt and everything. We do love them, but we want to be able to support other farmers and other producers of these other crops here on island. So I leave you with that. I'm sure you'll have questions. And thank you so much for the opportunities today. I'm going to have some chocolate.
Thank you, Flores. That was amazing. Awesome sharing of your story. And it was great to hear so many similarities also with Richard and the idea that we're talking about cocoa value adding, but in fact, there is many products that come out of these farms. And I venture to guess if we had a group of cocoa experts on here, we would have heard just cocoa facts and figures. But to know that really this is a part of these agroforestry systems and it's tied to cultural values and being able to find opportunities to link those to markets, I think is wonderful. And I began by saying that these two enterprises represent innovation and diversification. And I think you have both really demonstrated that so well, and also holding, I think, to these strong values that I think are so important as we talk about, preserving our environment, but also the cultures and the traditions. And so I just want to applaud the both of you for an amazing presentation and an amazing experience. I know we have come a little bit to the end of the time. I've been scanning some of the question and answers. Thank you for Excel for posting the links, because both Flores and Richard, their companies are very well represented on social media and web presence. So please feel free to follow them on their social media channels, read about some of these experiences that they've had and the different cocoa shows. I think that community of practice that both have been working to develop is something that we need to do more of. Certainly, I've learned a lot today, and I hope also our listeners have. So, Iselina, I'll give it over to you if there's any final questions or that came out from the chat for Flores, or just to kind of wrap us up.
Yeah, thanks very much, Kyle. Thank you very much, Flores, as well. A very interesting and very comprehensive presentation. And even the questions I had myself, like women and youth, you cover them, because we have been talking about agro-processing, but also agri-tourism, which at the end of the day is high-end market as well, is basically your exporters at home. So they can be your ambassadors as well. Obviously, I thought they could be more attracted, knowing that we have difficulties in all regions, to keep young people, in agriculture, because of the, all the ideas around that is not, it doesn't pay well, it's not nice work, it's hard, etc. these are examples where, there are opportunities of very nice stories. So there are no questions because it's all appreciations, but it's appreciations about the pathway, the story, the links to the local communities, while it's very nice products at the end and with prizes, with very, very nice, despite difficulties, of course. So that's why I also would like that in the audience, or when we share the video, because we will share, of course, the recording and the presentations, that anybody, in addition to COLEAD and to Pacific Farmers Organization, that can help in any part, where you need, because it's a very, very difficult environment. I mean, is, as you say, labeling, is packaging, is, equipment and so on, can help, because those are stories of entrepreneurs, local entrepreneurs that are creating nice stories, I mean, employing people, and not only that, but really attracting others to do the same, because it's very inspiring, obviously. And you see the remarks from Tanzania and from Kenya and from the Caribbean, and that can relate to that. So thank you so much to our green entrepreneurs, which is the other thing I like, of course. I mean, you cannot just be competing on, and you don't want to compete either in intensification with all. Richard knows better than me what it implies. So the stories of agroforestry as well are very, very interesting to me. So thank you so much. That's the only thing I can say. Thank you, Kyle, to you and your colleagues, obviously, for the session today. Thank you very much, Richard. Happy to see you after many decades. It happens we know each other for a very long time, but I haven't seen him for 25 years. So thank Kyle for bringing him back. Thank you very much, Doris. And
thank you.
Yes, we keep
and please, colleagues, when we share the recording, if you have anybody that has watched that you think might be interested, please share the video recording and the link. We wish Richard and Floris a wonderful day and a good day on the farm. And we look forward to seeing you again in person. Thank you so much, everyone.